This is Josh Reeves, and you're listening to the Mile High Church podcast. Thanks for listening. Hey, December 23rd and 24th are our candlelight services. They are inspiring, revelatory, and give you a sense of hope for yourself and humanity. And I don't know about you, but I sure do need it. The 23rd and 24th, 1, 4, and 7. And the 7 p.m.s are streaming online. Hope you can join us. Good morning. As we move into the holiday season, I wanted to address the topic of home with us this morning. And in this message, you'll hear to me refer to home as the place we grew up, but also as a name for God. And my goal is that you can get in touch with what home means to you, and perhaps the opportunity to evolve or even reinvent that understanding. Hence the title of today's message, Home is Where the Blank Is. And I'll ask you, home is where fill in the blank is. Heart, great. Great answers. Home is where the heart is the most popular. From the early African American tradition, we get the tales of Brer Rabbit. And in the tales of Brer Rabbit, there is the concept of the laughing place. The laughing place is that place where you can be free, where you can fully be yourself and let your hair down, where you can be the soul that you are. Maya Angelou said, "The ache for home lives in all of us, the safe place where we can go as we are and not be questioned." For a lot of us, that sounds just like home to us. But for others, that sounds like the opposite of home to us. Because for many of us, home is not where the heart is, it's where the work is. It's where my issues were installed. It's where my neuroses were manufactured. It's where my idiosyncrasies developed. And every time I return home, I am reminded of their installation. No matter how much growth I think I've accomplished, coming home brings me down to earth. I think this is why Ram Dass famously said, if you think you're enlightened, go home for Thanksgiving. So Josh, you're a what? You're a spiritual practitioner, huh? And you believe that we're all one and that there's a divine good operating through everything. Look, everybody, Josh is a whack-titioner. Several of our whack-titioners will be available for prayer after service in front of the stage. Here's some rose-colored glasses for you. Sometimes our growth gets challenged in family. Even Jesus was performing miracles at the synagogue in his hometown one day. And a couple people in the crowd go, "Hey, wait, isn't that Mary and Joseph's kid? Who the heck does he think he is?" And the people buy into it, and not even Jesus Christ is able to perform miracles that day. That's how challenging family and coming home can be for so many of us. For a lot of us, as much as we love our family members, there's a family consciousness that we struggle with. It might be that we've done our growth work and we're done with sometimes that family energy of talking about people, maybe even family members that aren't there gossiping, talking more about othering and dislike for political candidates as opposed to the everyday issues that affect our lives. We feel disconnected, unseen, and like we're not able to be our true selves. And this sometimes, again, brings up those old wounds. Because for so many of us, home is not where the heart is, and it's not where the work is. Home is where the hurt is. Home is where the hurt is. Mary Oliver, she explained the idea that we have three selves. The first self she defines as the child that I was. all of us are walking around with this child that we were. She shares of being a little girl and her father dropping her off at a skating rink and forgetting all about her. She was there all day for hours and hours, and thank God she ran into a neighbor who called Dad to come and pick her up. And she shared as her father walked into the skating rink that he looked beautiful and happy and free. I can see even now, she shares in memory, what an alleviation, what a lifting from burden he had felt in those few hours. It lay on him, that freedom, like an aura. Then I put on my coat and we got into the car, and he sat back in the awful prison of himself. The old veils covered his eyes, and he did not say another word. Frederick Buechner alludes to this idea of family and that one half of them that can love us unconditionally, but that other half, intentionally or unintentionally, that can sting us like a wasp. And the sting comes back every time we remember. Because for so many of us, home is where the hurt is. The second self that Mary Oliver speaks to, she calls our social self. I would call it our superficial self, our manufactured self. It's the self that leaves home and tries to make its way in the world. And we struggle to make this self. And it makes me wonder, when we build this self, am I building this self to walk the path that my family set forth for me? Am I walking it to live God's calling in my life? Or am I living it to run away from home, to get away? Parker Palmer, the great Quaker teacher, he talks about sharing in high school when asked what he was going to do with his life, that he wanted to be a naval aviator and then an ad man. He had met a naval aviator that was a friend of his father's and really admired him, and he loved to play with words, and he thought that his family would like this. So he set upon that path, and it took decades of listening for the voice of God in his life to realize that his true vocation was teaching and spiritual leadership. He shares, our deepest calling is to grow into our own authentic selfhood, whether or not it conforms to some image of who we ought to be. As we do so, we will not only find the joy that every human being seeks, we will also find our path of authentic service in the world. I was very blessed to find my vocation at an early age. I came into the Church of Religious Science as a teenager and was on the ministerial path immediately. But looking back, I could admit to you that as much as I was answering God's calling in my life, I was just as much running away from home. I was becoming a minister to do two things. One, to escape my family, and two, to affirm that I would never have one of my own. But it was interesting what happened. And again, it wasn't really escaping my family members. It was that consciousness of family. I wanted to do something so out of the box, and I sure the heck did. It sure surprised my family. And the greatest miracle that ever happened in my ministry, something that shocked me so grandly, is the day of my ministerial graduation, Mom and Dad came. Mom and Dad came to my ministerial graduation. It was so weird to see these two worlds kind of coming together. And there was a wonderful minister, Nirvana Gale, who spoke, who they were so impressed with. And they started, my parents, when I started a church, they started showing up. Sometimes early on, no one would be there. And so the sermon would begin, Mom, today's sermon is... I hope it doesn't happen today, but to this day, my mom was the only person to ever correct a sermon right in the middle of it. I was sharing about that song, A Different Drum, listen to it today, and how Sonny and Cher had sang it. And Mom raises her hand. Didn't know that she wasn't supposed to do that. Yes, Mom, it was by the Stone Ponies, Josh, Linda Ronstadt. Thank you, Mom, and continued on my way. And when I got the pulpit in Seal Beach, California, my family lived close by, and they would come every Sunday. And things were getting so busy that I would get to say hi and bye to them briefly, but the family would go and they would have lunch without me because I was working, and talk about the sermon. My mom took the basics class with me. What a miracle. This thing that I had entered to escape from home is the very thing that took me back there, is the very thing in so many ways I'd like to think healed my family, allowed us to become more open and affectionate towards one another. What a gift that was for me and for them. Ministers have a history of not having to have families, right? It's right there in the Catholic tradition, right? And in religious science, I said, I don't have to be celibate, do I? Okay. But, it's so emotionally fulfilling. You get to connect with people, and you get to work with kids. You get to do all this kind of stuff. So I will just work as a minister, connect with everybody, and then go into my cave and watch Game of Thrones at night. It'll be great. And I won't have to do the family thing. Enter an incredible woman named April in my life. April I had been friends with since I was 17 years old, and I'll always remember the night she called me when she was 19 years old, and she had found out she was pregnant. And she was doing the courageous work of figuring out what to do, and she had a beautiful son named Gavin. And I'd always been interested in April, and I'm ashamed to say this, but I was a 22-year-old boy. I just crossed that off my list. That relationship's not going to happen now. Fast forward about 7 years later, I get the pulpit there in Seal Beach, and April lives in Nevada, has always wanted to live in California, moves to Long Beach, California, and the church needs a youth director. April, perfect fit. And over 6 years, we built the church from 60 people to several hundred. We had this little shoebox of a youth ministry. April somehow magically fit 60, 70 kids in there a week, and we were ministering together. I was caught. Right? This thing, ministry, that I had gotten to avoid marriage led me right into it. And then there was beautiful Gavin. I was working in San Diego before I came to Seal Beach, and I was doing what all of us ministers love to do. After church, we drink beer and watch football. So I'm 28 years old, and I'm 2 or 3 beers in, and I'm outside, and the sun is shining in my face, and I go, God, I guess I could be doing something more constructive with my free time. Enter this beautiful 6-year-old boy, Gavin, who, yes, was April's son, but there was also this unique calling there. When he would cry or when he would laugh, I could feel the protective energy, the resistant energy of my heart being chipped away. And there was this calling, love this young man. And what I didn't realize at the time is what Gavin had for me is a knowledge of what family really is and is all about. One day, the church service is over in Seal Beach, and I'm saying goodbye to people, but what I'm really thinking about are those beers in San Diego. Those were great times. Wishing to be right there, and here comes little Gavin. He's walking up, and he has gotten a little trinket from youth church, and he wants to give it to me. And it's this little statuette that says, "The love of a family is life's greatest blessing." Something I didn't or couldn't believe at the time, but was taught to me that day. The love of a family is life's greatest blessing. I got to share the impact to Gavin that he's had on my life recently. I don't know if he heard it, but I hope he does. Palmer adds, "We arrive in this world undivided, integral, whole. But sooner or later we erect a wall between our inner and outer lives, trying to protect what is within us or to deceive the people around us. Only when the pain of our dividedness becomes more than we can bear do most of us embark on an inner journey toward living divided no more." One half of vocation and your way of being in the world is about moving on from home, but it's not complete until the other half of it takes place, which is it brings you back there, or it helps you reinvent it with new meaning. So again, I'll invite you to consider, what does home mean to you? And if you don't like the answer, maybe it's time to reinvent it, because that home is where that child you were has to live. And that home is where that social self needs to come back to. And when it's a sacred place, when it becomes not a place but a consciousness, it's then that life comes together and we can start to flow and thrive and deepen in our lives. Embracing home as a consciousness that is up to each of us, I have some wishes about home to share with you today. The first is that home is where the acceptance is. Home is where the acceptance is. Some of this might be hard for some of us to take. Home is where the acceptance is. It's up to us. In 2018, we had a little girl named Nancy June. She's 6 now. And it's such a blessing in my life to be her dada. And what she has taught me is the meaning of acceptance. I have never felt so accepted in my life than by Nancy June. Anyone here a big sorry person? That you say sorry all the time? You say sorry for being sorry, for saying I'm sorry. I'm most people. Are you there? Are you here? Okay, our support group starts 11:30 in the community center. I'm one of those folks. And you know why I am that way? Because the child I was. Because I was afraid that my presence could get in the way and things, because I want to keep and maintain harmony. And the last thing I want to do is break harmony and receive someone's anger, much less to express anger and start a problem. And I'm just so sorry. And so Nancy is the best person in my life. When I say sorry and don't need to, she goes, "Dada, why are you saying you're sorry? Just give me a hug." And we move on. One of the biggest mistakes we make with home is we try to integrate that social self in there. And by definition, we try to make our social selves perfect. Right? And when you're trying to be that perfect person at home, oh boy, are you going to fall on your face. Right? Home is that place where, not where we get to practice our flaws, but where we get to be aware of them. Where we get to love and allow ourselves to be loved anyways, because we're accepted as we are. Fred Rogers said, "The greatest illusion any of us need to give up is the image of ourselves as a perfect person." And family and home is created through that vessel of acceptance, which says, I accept you just as you are. Just as you are. There's a famous quote from Ronald Reagan, who wrote a letter to his son, Michael. Reagan had had a disastrous first marriage and then a wonderful marriage with Nancy. And this was his message to his son. "There is no greater happiness for a man than approaching a door at the end of a day, knowing someone on the other side of that door is waiting for the sound of his footsteps." In order to have those footsteps anticipated by the people on the other side of the door, we have to accept them. And in order to anticipate that acceptance, we have to accept ourselves as we're walking up those stairs. Home is where the acceptance is. What does it mean to be a consciousness of home? It means to be a consciousness of acceptingness for whoever we interact with. Home is where the acceptance is, and I also wish for you that home is where the healing is. Home is where the healing is. What is that leap to move from that place of home is where the wounding and the woundedness is, to home is where the healing is? It takes some of the hardest work you will ever do in your life, but what it means is I release every person of my biological and chosen family from my grievance. I set you free from my grievance and my judgment, and I celebrate the blessing you are in my life. As difficult as that is, I have learned in my experience that that is the only way to lay a foundation for true, meaningful healing. I release you from my grievance, and I honor the blessing you are in my life. I had all sorts of judgments about my parents, not as individuals, but as the parents that I thought they should have been and should have showed up this way and da-da-da-da. That all went away when I set them free just for a moment from being mom and dad and saw for the first time Mike and Lori. And when I saw Mike and Lori, I fell in love. I was able to understand so much more about why they were the way they were, did the things they did, etc., and I was endlessly fascinated with them. And the curious paradox is when I released them just from that role as being mom and dad, I started to feel all that love and affection that I'd been doing so much work to weed out or to be afraid of in my life. There's a book I love. It's called Gilead by Marilyn Robinson, and it doesn't take much to explain why I love it. It's about an old dying pastor who has a little son, and he's remarking, he's journaling, he's thinking about how his time on earth is short, and he's thinking about this blessing of being a parent. And at one point he says, "I'd never have believed I'd see a wife of mine doting a child of mine. It still amazes me every time I think of it. I'm writing this in part to tell you that if you ever wonder what you've done in your life, and everyone does wonder sooner or later, you have been God's grace to me. A miracle, something more than a miracle. You may not remember me very well at all, and it may seem to you to be no great thing to have been the good child of an old man in a shabby little town you will no doubt leave behind. If only I had the words to tell you." The irony of that statement being, yes, you do have the words, and so do you. You have those words available to share with your family of choice, your family of origin, whether it's writing, speaking them out loud, or just being with the presence of passed on loved ones in the sanctuary of your own soul and place. We have that ability to share and give thanks for the blessing that our family has been in our lives, putting the rest aside. And then we assume home as that consciousness of healing. Home is where the acceptance is. Home is where the healing is. And lastly, home is where the soul is. Home is where the soul is. Oliver speaks to three selves: the child we were, the social self. The last she refers to as that part of us that longs for the eternal. That longs for the eternal. She says, "Knowledge has entertained me, and it has shaped me, and it has failed me. Something in me still starves. In what is probably the most serious inquiry of my life, I have begun to look past reason, past the provable in other directions. Now I think there is only one subject worth my attention, and that is the precognition of the spiritual side of the world, and within this recognition, the condition of my own spiritual state." Home is a place to express our humanness, but it is also the place that can bring forth the greatest awareness there is of our own divinity, of our own soul, of that laughing place. That place where when we look at everything that we've gone through in our life, the good celebrations and the trials and tribulations, where our truest, most sincere response is joy, is exhilaration, is gratitude for this thing called life itself. So there is this child we were. We don't heal that child by getting rid of or fixing or changing, but by learning how to respond to that child and take care of them. The social self isn't complete until it takes us away from home and brings us back there to reinvent and uplift. And home is not complete until it has become a sanctuary in which our soul can live and breathe and thrive. And in that laughing place, we touch upon the eternal. And the eternal touches upon us, and we finally experience the full breadth and wholeness of our being. Moving into prayer this morning, I invite any of our practitioner prayer partners to stand and join me. I am home. I am home. I am home. And as I come home, I know that I am safe. I know that I live in the sanctuary of God's divine beingness. And in this home, I know that what comes forth is the love of family. What comes forth are the hard lessons that I've learned. What comes forth is an awareness, not just of the past, but of the eternalities of life that tell the story of the soul and our existence. What I affirm and know right now is that there is no more space for grievance in my house. That there is no more space for belittlement or hurting in this house. That any hurt that comes forth to be healed, not to be prosecuted. That the best of who I am comes forth in this consciousness of home. And by coming home myself, I am a presence of home for others. I am a presence for their own self-acceptance, for their own healing, for the revelation of their own soul, their soul's work, and their soul's joy. So grateful to know this truth. I head into this holiday season, which literally or metaphorically means returning home. May this consciousness of home express as God's presence in my life. May I return there again and again for wisdom, for joy, and that deep and profound love that is the truth of who we are, the only truth there's ever been, and the only truth there ever will be. I am home, and so it is. Amen. Thanks for listening to the Mile High Church podcast. This podcast is made possible by the generous contributions from listeners like you. To make a donation, please visit milehighchurch.org.